Hey, everybody, welcome into The Big Factor. Today's guest is Brad Bradley, the brother of Amy Lynn Bradley, who tragically disappeared during a family cruise in 1998, a case that continues to capture attention worldwide. Over the years, Brad has become a passionate advocate for his sister, tirelessly seeking answers and keeping her story alive. Brad, first of all, welcome to the show. We appreciate you coming on.
No problem, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Brad, when you first heard that Netflix was producing a documentary on Amy's case, what were your initial thoughts, and how long ago did they initially approach you?
I mean, I'd have to look back. I think it was early part of 2024. We were talking to a guy by the name of Bo Carson, who lives out in LA, and he was helping us with some things. And one day he said he had these producers from Ample Entertainment that he'd like to introduce us to, who were interested in doing a documentary about Amy. And we, every time, for 27 years, anytime something comes up, we absolutely do it. We try not to leave any opportunity on the table. So, yeah, but I think the overall project took, I'm guessing, 18 months, a year and a half or so from the time it started until it came out a couple weeks ago.
So, Brad, I think sometimes when we hear stories like this in life, like sometimes people become a name and not just like a human being, or it's like the facts, or people on the internet just want to find out certain things. So I was wondering if before we got too deep into it, you could share like some good memories with Amy or like some things from your childhood that you'd be comfortable sharing with us.
Yeah, man. I mean, Amy she and I, other than when I was little and was the annoying little brother. Once I kind of grew up and she stopped yelling at mom and dad to get me out of her room, we became really good friends, and we grew up, in a really nice neighborhood. We played in the creek. We rode our bikes. We played basketball. We had, a hoop in the driveway. She was always better than me until I got big enough to just kind of back her down to the rim. But we spent a lot of time together. Grew up swimming on the swim team. Lots of years and time spent at the pool, and we were always just really close. And when she in high school, I'd go hang out with her and her friends when they'd have parties, and I'd go visit her up at Longwood and hang out with them, and we'd shoot pool when she came back into town. And obviously I was still living at home when she came, back to visit from Longwood, and we'd always go out and be hanging out together. But it was, we had an awesome childhood. I know a lot of people aren't lucky enough to say that, but I certainly can. So, it was all good, man. It was, she and I were more like best friends than brother and sister, there towards, in our early 20s. So, everything was great.
Thanks for sharing that.
Brad, a thing with these documentaries are they're really good to get exposure, and obviously this has brought a ton of new exposure to Amy's case, but they also do tend to paint a picture the way that they want it painted and the way that they want it produced. I wanted to ask about like your grade of the accuracy of the Netflix documentary, and if there was anything that, to start off our interview with you today, you wanted to, right off the rip say that you wanted to explain or correct from the Netflix documentary?
Yeah, I don't think they, I got asked this last night actually in an interview, and first thing I always preface with is that, myself and my parents and our family and our friends are all, extremely grateful to Ari, Mark, and Phil Lott, the producers that put this together. They, brought Amy's name back to life around the world, and people are all talking about it, and it had been a number of years that this whole story had kind of gone stagnant. So I first want to say we were very pleased with it, and we think they did a great job, and again, we'll be forever grateful for the attention that it's brought. I guess the only thing other than them leaving out a lot of important, pertinent information and details about things, and it's to be fair, you can't fit 27 years worth of stuff in 3 episodes.
Yeah.
So I think they did a good job telling the story to get people's attention, and they succeeded in that. Early on when I started the X page, and I was never big on social media other than just kind of swiping through and looking. But it bothered me that so much time was spent on her sexual preferences or sexuality, and the whole story wasn't told. You may have seen other interviews I've done where I've talked about this, but Amy had a boyfriend that she worked with, and they were dating for several months leading up to the cruise. They flew him out and interviewed him for like 5 hours, and he has nothing but wonderful things to say about Amy. He loved her. I'm not 100% sure she had the same strong feelings toward him, but he was completely excluded from the story, and people, they painted a picture that Amy was, just a lesbian and straight gay, and that really wasn't the case. And I think it made a lot of people think that it was something that we had just learned before the trip. And I mean, Amy came out to us. Actually, I was at school, so she came out to my parents in 1995, and then I think a couple weeks later, I still remember where we were here in Chesterfield, and when she told me, and I was like, oh, okay, great. So I never had any problems. She dated guys, she dated girls. I liked her boyfriends, I liked her girlfriends. They all spent time at the house. Spent a lot of time with the family, went on trips with us, spent the night. It was all, nobody cared. I mean, obviously the initial surprise that my parents, and I think it's fair to say not many parents would choose that for their children, but it was well gotten over. Nobody had there was no contention between she and I, between her and my parents. We were all very happy. We loved Amy just like we always did, very much. And unfortunately, the way that it was presented, I think, and especially there was one particularly kind of disgruntled ex that talks about my dad writing this 3-page letter. My dad has told me, at best that thing was like 2 paragraphs on 1 page, and it was in response to, some shit she said. He doesn't remember what spurred the letter, but she can't produce this alleged 3-page letter. So a lot of people have the wrong idea about our family. They make assumptions. They look at my X page, and this whole thing, bringing up politics is just stupid when we're talking about this. But I support Trump, so I'm just a racist homophobe, I guess. And everybody just has that everybody that feels and says the nasty things that they say online is just straight up wrong. They don't know us, and they don't know Amy. Amy can't speak for herself, and hopefully one day, if we're lucky enough to find her, she can set the record straight on that.
So, Brad, I wanted to ask you about people jumping to conclusions on the internet based off of things they saw or heard in the Netflix documentary. Where do you think Amy's head was at, like how excited she was for the cruise and approaching it, like through the lens of having a boyfriend, like despite what Molly said, I guess, about possibly meeting up when she got back?
Well, and I'd like to start that answer by saying that, Amy had written her boyfriend, whose name I'm leaving out of this because I don't want the world, coming and looking him up. But she wrote him a letter, I think a couple weeks before the cruise, kind of thanking him for everything, telling him how much fun she'd had with him and how wonderful she thought he was, how much time, how much she enjoyed spending time with his family and having him around ours. But that, she wanted to kind of step back and take things a little slow. So it was almost maybe kind of like a little breakup note. And I don't doubt that Amy probably had plans to get back together with Molly. Molly's great. I have known Molly a lot of years. She was at my parents' house Easter before last for dinner. We've always had a great relationship, and I like Molly a lot. So that having been said, you're gonna have to repeat your question because I kind of went on a tangent and forgot the point.
Yeah, no worries at all. So I was just kind of wondering where you thought Amy's head was entering the trip, like how excited she was to be with your family amidst all this.
And I mean, both of us. So I'm afraid of flying. I really don't fly unless I absolutely have to. So I had a little hesitation about going on the trip just because we had to fly down to Florida and San Juan. She had hesitation about the trip because she didn't like the ocean, not, as far as what was in it. So we both kind of got over our little fears, and we're really both really excited. When Mom and Dad told us they had gotten permission for us to go, we were pumped. We packed together. We talked about what we were going to do. We flew down together separately from my parents. We were having a great time, and on the trip, we were going to the pool, we were going to the casino, we were going to the dance club, we were having drinks. We went out on an excursion on Aruba. She had just recently graduated college, had a great job at one of the top restaurants here in Richmond. She was actually getting ready to start a new job with my uncle's computer company when she got back. She'd just gotten a brand new apartment. She had just gotten an 8-week-old English Bulldog puppy that she'd wanted her whole life. She was buying gifts for friends. She was writing postcards to her friends back home, talking about what they were going to do when she got back. I mean, she was great. I mean, we were having a good time, and she wasn't struggling with her identity. There was none of that crap. So anybody that thinks that, I mean, you can't control what people think and the assumptions they make and or their opinions. But, Amy didn't care about any of that.
And then you had also mentioned just her fear of the water, right? And just that's obviously a big part of going on a cruise. And is that what makes it so not plausible to you for the people that will say like, oh, well, she fell, or she could have been sick and, jumped off the side, or whatever it might be? Like, her fear of the water was something that you and your family were plenty aware of even prior to going onto the ship.
Yeah. And it wasn't, I mean, to be fair, I mean, or, clear, she wasn't afraid of the water. I mean, we grew up swimming. She swam like a fish. She coached a swim team. She was a lifeguard. She was proficient in the water. So being in the water wasn't a problem.
Right.
It's what's in the water that you can't see. So certainly one of the things that makes it ridiculous that she would, jump off a balcony 8 stories up and terrify herself to death didn't happen. And then and plus there was no reason for her to do that. She was very happy, had a lot going on in her life. Everything was very exciting and new. She was kind of starting her big girl life, and then as far as her falling over the rail, I mean, Amy was 5'6". The rails were, I don't know exactly how tall, 42, 48 inches tall. Her center of gravity is much lower than the rail. And she wouldn't even go near the thing. I mean, when we got on the boat the first night, I leaned over the rail and looked straight down at the water. And I'm like, oh my God, look at this. And she said, nope. She stood back by the sliding glass door, and at no point on that trip would she even go near the rail. So the crap about the table being pushed up against the balcony, that morning when we woke up, that table was against the sliding glass door next to the chair she was sitting in. The FBI had me, my dad, and my mom in separate rooms, each draw where the furniture was that morning. All 3 of those drawings, the table's against the window. Now, you heard the FBI agents say that the cruise staff cleaned the room. So I think they'd love everybody to think that she jumped or fell because that eliminates any liability they have. And my opinion is that table was moved when the room was clean, because that's not where it was when we woke up.
Brad, first off, I just want to say thoughts and prayers to you and your family. Obviously, something that hard to imagine for anyone to be going through what you guys have gone through ever since that happened. I wanted to ask personally how you guys go about when people report things to you all about what they may have seen or, sightings or anything of that nature, how hard it can be at times to decipher what may be real and what's fake. Because sometimes people may, just kind of want to be a part. Like when Netflix is dropping a documentary, they want to just, say, oh, well, I saw this X amount of years ago. Just to be a part of it was like, why didn't you say anything then? And like how, because for you guys, that's something that, when you get another lead, that's something that could exhilarate you. But sometimes it's hard to distinguish. Yeah,
we've been on that roller coaster of hopes up and hopes dashed 100 times. It's and we're hopeful that this ride doesn't end the same way. It's hard. I mean, back in the day, I don't know if you guys know about Frank Jones, the guy that conned us out of 200 some $1,000, claiming posing to be like an ex-special forces kind of guy. We were actually in a hotel room down in Fort Lauderdale that we flew down to and had a private jet on standby because he was down in the islands with this team of operators, and they knew where Amy was. They were tracking the people that were in control of her. They went as far as to stencil tattoos on a woman and take pictures of her sitting on the beach with one of her alleged captors. And we ended up having a guy who's been with us ever since that outed that guy, Frank Jones, for being a fraud. So that was a huge, I mean, we thought that was it. We thought we had her. He ended up spending 5 years in jail for electronic fraud, for sending the pictures and those kinds of things, and was ordered to pay mandatory restitution, of which we never saw a dollar. So those kinds of things, you have people come out of the woodwork that, and just like now, we got these things on TikTok about this lady, and we found that, I don't know if you guys have seen it, this blonde lady from behind Curacao. We found the original photo and our investigator spoke to that woman's daughter. Someone photoshopped those tattoos on that picture. That original picture didn't have any tattoos. So that kind of stuff still happens. And yeah, it's hard to figure out what's what. I mean, we have a small team of people that are helping us, go through all these emails and all these pictures and all these opinions and theories. And it's a lot. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of pieces of information that are coming in that were, some are credible enough to have to, go after and rule it out as far as, how significant it may be or not. But yeah, it's really tough. And it does, you see certain things and your heart flutters and you're like, oh my God. And then it's like, yeah, oh well. So we're hoping and we're dependent really on somebody coming forward. I mean, there's one person that knows something. I think there's probably quite a few people that know something. And all this seemingly hinges on somebody growing half a conscience and coming forward and deciding it's time to, provide the information that they've been holding on to. So yeah, I hope that answered your questions. If there's any part of it that I didn't, just shoot again.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Brad, we were as a group very fascinated by the Church of Scientology element, as well as the room check, which we talked about a little bit, but could you possibly explain maybe more about what you believe could have went on between them and your family?
What I'll say first before I explain that interaction, you have to understand when this Netflix series came out, it was the first time in about 25 years that everybody's paying attention. And I've been talking about this Scientology theory. I don't know if it's a theory or just something that's bothered the hell out of me for the last 25 years, because every single media outlet or news organization or interview that I've done, I've talked about it. And nobody ever will include it in the story. They don't bring it up. They exclude that part of the interview every single time. And so I took it upon myself to, make it known, because it's always been something that's bothered me. I always felt that the FBI was, dismissive of the theory, and they'd say like, yeah, well, we looked and there's nothing there. And it wasn't satisfying to me. So, this all goes back to two ladies that Amy was talking to the night of the pool party before, it transitioned into the next day, early morning. And she spent about an hour talking to these two ladies, which, by the way, the FBI has told us before that they know who these people are, these ladies are. They have never told us who they are. They won't. So if they would simply have said, these ladies were customs officials from Aruba or police officers, which I've heard in recent interviews by some ex-Cruise staff, that is who they suggest that those ladies were, and those uniforms kind of matched either Aruban or Curacao police or customs officials that were on that boat for some reason. So, you got a bunch of people get on the boat. It's like this entourage that comes on with the performers and the dancers and the jugglers and all the, people that were performing at the party. And it was this large group of people that weren't passengers or employees of the boat that just got on in a large group. And I think those ladies got on the boat that night from Aruba before we left. So forget what I just explained that I've heard recently. You got to understand, I'm living 25 years thinking about these two ladies. And so fast forward. Okay, so we get off the boat on on Curacao, the evening after of the same day Amy disappeared, probably about 5 p.m. I don't know exactly. And the president of my dad's company and his wife got off with us to help us. We weren't in any shape to figure out what to do or handle anything, really. I mean, we were a complete mess. So they got us a hotel room. I think it was called the Otrabanda, along the canal there. And the unfortunate part about that is that hotel was where we had to watch our boat leave on time, on schedule, that evening when they left Curacao. So we're in the room that night. We're contacting family back in Virginia. My ex-girlfriend, the one that was shown in the series, she was watching the animals in the house while we were gone. Everybody kind of convened at our house, aunts and uncles and cousins and, grandparents, everybody was there by the time people started finding out what had happened. So we spent some time talking to family. My mom was talking to one of her brothers about helping get the FBI involved, because had it not been for my family's efforts at home, FBI never would have been there. So after all that passed, the scene was horrible. My dad was so upset, he's throwing up and he's, vomiting blood at some point. My mom's curled up in a fetal position, just losing it on the bed. I'm sitting there in the chair. At one point I had to get out and get some fresh air. And I walk out and sit on the rocks and look at the ocean and kind of ponder life and try and, I'm racking my brain about what may have happened or what could have happened. The evening goes by and my mom eventually requests that Mike McCord, who's since passed, the president of my dad's insurance company, find us a priest to come to the room to pray with us. So apparently, I don't know whether it was the embassy or the U.S. consulate contacted some local churches, and they weren't able to find a priest. So around midnight, someone knocks on the door. We don't know anybody's coming. And these two guys are standing there in like maritime, kind of like captain's outfits, like naval kind of uniforms. And they introduced themselves as Steve Alpers and a guy named Ludwig. I don't remember his last name. My mom knows all this stuff, but they introduced themselves as officers from the Scientology ship called the Free Winds. Only thing I'd heard about Scientology is that, they do a lot of weird stuff and I'm not into it. So we say, okay, come in, because we assumed they were there to try and help us in some way. So they come in and they explain that they have methods and ways to help people deal with grief and loss. And they wanted to do some verbal exercises and these kind of, I don't even know what to call them. So, we're sitting there and they'd say, okay, now that you've lost Amy, tell us something you haven't lost. And so we would each take turns individually. Now that we've lost Amy, we haven't lost each other. Now that we've lost Amy, we haven't lost our family and our friends back home. And this went on, we took turns, 3 or 4 times and went through that exercise. And then they went into asking really specific questions about, Did Amy smoke, and what were Amy's favorite cigarettes? Did Amy drink alcohol, and what did she drink? What was her favorite beer? Even down to like, what were her favorite snacks? What's her favorite soda? And again, at the time, it was like, okay, we're remembering her, very fondly, and it was very emotional. And but later it kind of struck me that they were garnering a lot of really specific information about her, which bothered me to no end for years and years and years, because I couldn't ever get anybody to pay attention to what a weird experience that was. They ultimately kind of had us lay down on the bed, face down, and they kind of laid hands on your back and would rub their hands up your back. And when that started, my dad kind of spoke up and was like, all right, guys, we appreciate you coming, but please leave. They actually invited us to come on to the free winds. And we were like, nah, we're good. So we didn't do that. So when I got home from that trip, we were doing everything we could to try and figure out what the hell happened. So I get online and I'm doing a lot of research into Scientology, and I'm looking at the free winds and find out it's headquartered in Curacao, which obviously we didn't know or have any clue about. That boat travels to Aruba, where she was allegedly seen. That boat is headquartered in Curacao, where she was allegedly seen by Eyewitness, and that boat goes to Barbados, and back and forth repeatedly. That's the track that boat is on. I found uniforms, which since I've been told isn't the case, but back then I found uniforms that were pretty much the same exact uniforms that those two ladies Amy was talking to were wearing. Since I posted that on X, everybody tagged all these people and these ex-Scientologists. We were never able to elicit any response from Leah Remini over the years after repeated attempts and to communicate with her. She just never responded. I was able to talk to Aaron Levin-Smith from a podcast called Growing Up in Scientology. I was able to get in touch with a guy named Tony Ortega, who I think I understand he's not an ex-Scientologist. He's just like an anti-Scientologist. I got in touch with Valeska Paris, who was actually on the boat at that time and ended up having to escape from the free winds. I spoke with Claire Headley, who was above Mike Render in that sea organization. And each one of those people individually, although they admitted it was extremely weird, the experience we went through, and the Scientology spokespeople recently, after a Daily Mail article, contacted the reporter and said that the U.S. consulate, after failing to find a priest, understanding that they, helped people with grief and loss and whatever, contacted them to come help us. And maybe that's all that was. I don't know. But that's why I brought it up, because no one's ever talked about it. No one's ever reported on it, even though I've been talking about it since day one. And I don't know whether those people have put my concerns completely to rest. And I feel a little bit better about it, I will say, but I don't know who to believe. I don't know if these people are honest. I don't know how Scientology works. I think it does distract from the prime suspect in the case. And, if she's, kidnapped onto a Scientology ship, she's not in a brothel, and she's not walking around on Barbados. And she, the three eyewitnesses that we have that saw her that morning with Yellow, 2 from outside the club, 1 from inside the club. I think that's pretty much as clear as it gets. So I almost hated to, in the end, that I distracted everybody with that outlier kind of story, but that's what it was.
No, I mean, we definitely wanted to ask about Yellow as well, just because, of all the bizarre, it almost felt like, as I'm watching this documentary, right, and it's a real life thing that your family had to endure, but it's like all of these bizarre characters that you guys endured, from the guy that was in the room next to you, to Yellow, and then you had mentioned the Scientology stuff, like. There was just a lot of weirdness that follows this, but of all of the weirdness, to me, it seemed like Yellow was definitely the one that was the most strange, especially because Netflix finds a way to bring in his daughter, who is echoing your guys' concerns about her own father, and what a crazy moment that was in the entire series. Just how much do you weigh in those two sightings that the girls had of Amy with Yellow that morning?
I mean, those were the most crucial of any. Those girls, so you know, that story I explained with Scientology, we after the ship's captain lied to us and told us that they had done a complete search of the ship and assured us Amy is not on the boat. You need to get off on Curacao so we can leave on time. And you know, the infamous cruise director, cruises go on, you know, life goes on, so they got to go. So you guys get off in case they find her in the water. So we agreed. We trusted that what they were telling us was true about the search that they performed, which we later found out wasn't. We said, well, if she's in the water, someone put her there, you know, because she didn't go near the rail to fall off. She didn't climb on the rail. She's not on the table. She's not jumping off the boat. And if she were to be found, we wanted to be there. So we get off. The next day, at some point, we were contacted by, I don't know whether it was the harbor police or whoever was conducting all the search in the canal and all the, you know, around the perimeter of where that ship was. And they assured us that Amy was not in the water. Nothing was found, and they believe very strongly that if she were to have gone into the water, they would have found something. So we say, okay, we're getting back on the boat. And so we got on a commercial flight from Curacao to St. Martin. I believe we beat the ship there, I think, because I think we stayed in a hotel, and then the next morning we got on a ferry or a tender or something and went out to where the boat was anchored on St. Martin to get back on. That time frame is kind of a blur. You know, I've talked to my parents about it recently because that was on Wednesday or Thursday when we got back on the boat. So it was about 48 hours had passed. And that morning at about 3:45, I think it was actually 3:47, my mom's found the old documentation from when this happened back then. We're in the hallway, my mom and I, and we're attempting to retrace Amy's potential steps that morning. So, you know, we come out of the room and we take a right, and we go out into where you would go to get towards the elevator. And as soon as we got into that open area, Crystal and Lori came literally running up to us frantically. I mean, if you could have seen the look on their faces, they were breathless. They looked like they had seen a ghost. They said, oh my God, we've been looking for you. You know, they didn't know we got off. And they were 100% adamant. I mean, they had met Amy and me. They had met Yellow. Yellow had flirted with them. This isn't like an eyewitness sighting 5 years later where someone says, I didn't know that this was the girl, and then I saw the story. So these girls they were in the club that night. They were out, you know, after I left the disco, they're out there walking. I remember seeing them out on the pool deck. They know who they saw because we were all together that whole night. And the FBI agent you'll see on the show, you know, says, unfortunately, we weren't ever able to corroborate their time frame. Well, the reason for that is because the FBI, still to this day, has never questioned or interviewed Crystal's mother, who we've spoken to, and we have a signed affidavit from her stating that she let those girls into the room, opening the door from the inside shortly after 6 a.m., which is why there's no key card information for when they returned. So those are the most crucial eyewitnesses. FBI dropped the ball right from the jump. They didn't take them seriously. I've spoken to the girls, you know, over the past few weeks, and you know, they feel like they were treated like two little drunk teenagers. And the due diligence that should have been done wasn't. Not only, and a lot of people don't know because it wasn't in the documentary about the third eyewitness, a 28-year-old girl that was in the Viking Lounge that morning. She spent the majority of her time there and was preparing for an excursion that morning. So she was up there very early. and saw Amy and Yellow come off the elevator from inside. So they went up to that upper area of the disco where they were sitting at the table when I left to go outside before I went back to the room. They went up to that same area. She says Yellow comes down, fixes a dark drink and hands it to Amy. And then they walk back into a back area where she couldn't see them any longer. She then says, and she testified to all this in the grand jury in Richmond years and years ago. We're currently trying to find this girl so we can talk to her and get a statement. She says that there was a young girl who she suspected to be about 18 or 19 years old that came out from behind the bar yelling, "Senorita kidnap, Senorita kidnap." And the bartender kind of pushed her back into the bar area. Now, this is what she testified to. So, I believe because the two eyewitnesses from outside, Crystal and Lori, saw Yellow come back down 10, 15 minutes later by himself, I think however he got her to meet him that morning, I don't know. I can't make sense of why she would have done that, why she wouldn't have told me she was doing something like that. But I think he was kind of a scout, kind of the first guy who takes her to this stage, hands her off to whoever takes her down on the bottom of the ship. And that's what I believe happened there. I do have a really strong theory about how they got her off the ship, which my investigator, doesn't want me speaking on right now. And he doesn't want, me to compromise what he's working on.
Yeah, understandable.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't via gangway. It wasn't her walking off the ship of her own volition. So, so you've got two eyewitnesses from outside the club watching them go up a glass elevator. You've got one eyewitness inside the thing. Again, she testified in the grand jury to what she saw. I don't really even know if the FBI interviewed her or did a polygraph. I don't know. FBI didn't tell you anything. So it's hard to know what was looked into, what wasn't. We don't even think that Yellow's roommate was questioned by the FBI. We don't think that Yellow's bandmates were questioned by the FBI. So, you've got a ship's security staff that is hired by a corporation and trained by a corporation, potentially looking out for the corporation, limiting liabilities and however you want to put it. One other interesting piece, when my dad woke up that morning, you know the story, woke up around 5:30, saw her on the balcony, saw her legs anyway. Woke up at 6 again, door was open, shirt she fell asleep on is on the chair, she's gone. He immediately gets up and goes out, this is about 6 a.m., and goes out looking, I think fully expecting to find her, up on the deck, doing whatever. And he didn't, obviously. So about 45 minutes pass, maybe even close to an hour. Again, all the time frames, and people are busting my ass about mixing up little bits of time here and there. I mean, 27 years worth of memories. It's kind of hard when you're not keeping track at the time exactly what times these things happen. But Dad said he came back to the room about 7, maybe just before. The chief of security just so happened on a boat the size of a city with thousands of people and hundreds of rooms. He's standing in our hallway because my dad hadn't said anything to anybody yet, hadn't made the purser's desk aware. But when he saw the security officer standing there with his walkie-talkie about 20, 30 feet from our door, he walked over to him and said, "Hey, I just want to let you know, I woke up this morning. My daughter's not in the room. I'm looking for her. I can't find her." He didn't say Yellow's name because we hadn't had the eyewitness account from Lori and Crystal yet until a couple of days later. In Yellow's most recent interview, and honestly the only interview I've ever seen him do in 27 years, he says that security called him at 7 a.m. asking him if he had the girl in his room that he was dancing with the night before. So first thing is, we didn't ever say Yellow's name. Second thing is, how does security know who he's dancing with the night before? And third thing is, the chief security officer's official report never makes any mention of his interaction with my dad in the hallway that morning. And he states that he first learned about a missing passenger at 7:33 a.m. when he was contacted by the purser's desk to let him know. So you've potentially got a chief security officer falsifying reports or excluding important documentation from his report in a potential criminal investigation. You've got Yellow saying that they called him at 7 o'clock asking if he's got a girl in his room. He also says they told him to stay in his room. Now, sometime between 7:30 and 8, I'm on the pool deck, sitting by the pool. You've heard the story about when he comes up to me and says, "Hey, I'm sorry to hear about your sister." He's supposed to be in his room, per him. He says he's in his room at 1 a.m. The key card data shows he entered his room at 3:35 a.m. That morning, he told me he left her at 3:30. So now he's lying. Clear as day, provable. And you don't lie when you're telling the truth. You don't have to. I've said it many times. Unfortunately, liars have to remember all the lies they've told. And apparently, he didn't when he gave that interview.
Yeah, Brad, I'm to kind of build off of that and to maybe put a bow on all of this a little bit, because some of us have been thinking we've seen some of the stuff you've said through and what was in the documentary, from, like you said, Yellow coming up to you and saying what he said before he would have even known, to all the sightings of, the naval guy and the lady in the bathroom who said they see a woman that looks just like her, followed by these armed guards or whoever's handling them. But that brings us to the last thing, where the FBI even confirmed that they believe that this lady that they found this photo of, or that was sent to you guys online, this Jazz, they confirmed that through their as far as they could figure out, that is Amy. How does that build up, and what do you guys even, how do you react to that? What do you try to do? And then just have like anything from there.
You mean when we got the pictures at first?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, holy shit. It was, because you got to remember, we're sent hundreds of pictures just like we are now, of people like asking if this is Amy, and it's not even close. And it's like, no. And then you get this picture and it's like, wow, whoa. And you start to do all these comparisons and analysis of a lot of different pictures of Amy. I will say there's a number of those pictures that people, that weren't on the documentary. I think there's like 10 photos of Jazz. And several of them are really, really strikingly close. And again, like you said, the FBI's analysis of the photos by their experts confirmed with high probability that it was her. You go 25 or whatever it is, 20 years after we got the photos, no one's ever come forward. As many shows as that picture's been on, and as many people know about it and are talking about it, where's this woman saying, that's not Amy, that's me? No one's ever come forward to refute that could be Amy, and letting the world know that it's a different person. There's some funny things about the pictures. There are certain positions or ways that she's positioned where the tattoos that she had can't be seen or wouldn't be seen. And then there are other pictures in that set of pictures where you should be able to see the tattoos, at least if the pictures aren't flipped or reversed or something. You think you're looking at her right ankle and it's really her left ankle or something different like that. We've been able to determine through some AI and some computer tricks that there seems to be digital noise, is how it's been explained to me, overlying the areas where her tattoos are. The girl does have a mole on her stomach, which I've looked back at pictures of Amy and I when we were in high school, and she doesn't have a mole there. But I have moles now that I didn't used to have, so I don't know that necessarily proves anything. I don't know how good Photoshop was back then, or what. We don't obviously know for a fact that that's her. But the eyes, she has one eye that's straight and one eye that's a little bit off. That's the same. Her teeth are the same. Her lips are the same. Her nose is the same. The ears are the same length and same shape and same angle. The jaw, the chin, the hairline. I mean, it's pretty crazy. So I don't know. And I can't claim to know that that's her for a fact. People have doppelgangers, and there's people that look like other people. So truthfully, I can't tell you with any certainty that it is. but it's definitely the closest picture I've ever seen. So, the eyewitness sightings, I find to be all credible. The one with Hefner in the brothel, that he didn't report until 2 years later. And when we were able to go back down there and search, well, we sent people to search that brothel, that place was burned down. So that lead ended right there. The only part of his story that I don't buy, and I know a lot of people are talking about the possibility of her looking for drugs or going to find drugs. I don't think so. Amy wasn't a drug user, no history in her life of anything like that. I mean, she smoked cigarettes and drank beer, but we didn't do drugs. We didn't talk about doing drugs. We didn't talk about finding drugs. It was none of that. So that whole angle of her trying to find drugs, I don't find to be, a possibility. I think that whatever reason Amy went to meet, or maybe she didn't go to meet, maybe she went out for some other reason and ran into Yellow. And she says, hey, my lighter stopped working. Do you know where some matches are? He's like, hey, come up to the bar. Or, who knows what happened? Your mind goes in circles a million times, a lot of different possibilities. But for whatever reason, I believe she was up in that dance club with him. The one thing I didn't mention is the one witness that testified in the grand jury, the one that was inside. Also, part of the story is that after Yellow handed her a drink, somebody turned the music up really loud. And that's, when the girl came out yelling what she did. Another interesting thing about Yellow's interaction with me when I was sitting by the pool at the table that morning is when he asked me when the last time he's like, I left her at 3:30. When was the last time you saw her? What happened? So I start going into, well, I left the club at 3 and I went back. He's like, hold on a second. I want my brother to hear this. And he walks over to another table, probably about 50 feet away. There's 3 or 4 or 5 guys sitting there. I don't really remember. He brings one of them back and says, okay, all right, go ahead. And so I proceeded to give them probably a pretty good timeline to go by if they were ever to be questioned straight out of my mouth. And I found it weird, not only that, A, what did he know and how did he know what to be sorry for so early? Why would he interrupt me and go get one guy, whether that was his roommate or whether that was somebody else involved, to get their story straight off mine? All those things, and there's so many little pieces that, again, I don't think it's fair to blame the Netflix producers for not including it all. It's impossible to include it all unless you got 10 seasons worth of shows to go on. So yeah.
Brad, we can't thank you enough for coming on here and sharing your voice and your memories. Tell us, how can listeners help, whether it's through sharing, supporting, or contributing in any possible way?
Well, there's a lot of different ways. I've been happy to answer everybody's questions and go through all the details. I can't tell you how many times I've answered the damn shoe question. And I think the details are important. I don't want you to get me wrong, but the focus should be now, what do we do? And where do we go from here? Talking about her shoes 27 years ago does really absolutely nothing other than maybe convince people she didn't jump or what, I don't know what the point of all that is really. But there's a couple of volunteer efforts on my X and my TikTok page, in the link tree in my bio. There's all the different links for, the GoFundMe to help us raise money to do all the things that we're having to pay for to do. The Project Miata, which is basically contacting your elected officials, whether it be local or state or federal, and imploring these people to refresh their attention to Amy's story, reinvestigate, because of how many people are paying attention and how many people care. If we ever had a chance, this is probably our last one. So we need a proper investigation to be done. Unfortunately, I think as it stands now, Yellow can't be questioned unless he agrees to it, per our own FBI. I don't know whether the Grenadian government can have any input or work with our authorities or our government to make something happen. But, we're trying to contact legislators and elected officials to help us make something happen. There's a Project Bailey, which is basically a social media outreach program in and around these islands. And you can go on these on the links on my bio and sign up for these volunteer efforts. So that's very helpful, both of those ways. There's, the Amy Alert petition on change.org that is meant to mandate something similar to an Amber Alert when a child goes missing on cruise ships, and basically alerts every single person right then, and you don't have 48 hours go by where nobody even knows there's a passenger missing, and you miss out on all the eyes and ears and attention that could have been had. Sharing the story, keeping the story alive, keeping the attention on it. I'm awful afraid. I can't tell you how many times over the years we get little glimpses of hope, and some people are paying attention, and then the news cycle shifts to the next thing, and something happens in the world and people stop talking about it, and it kind of goes quiet again. And I damn sure don't want to let that happen. So I appreciate everybody's interest. I can't tell you how much it means to me and our family and all our friends, all the prayers that we've received, all the loving messages, all the support that we're getting. And, it's coming close to a month since the show came out, and I can't tell, at least from my perspective, that it feels like we're still picking up steam. And I hope it continues in that direction. If Amy's out there, we hope we can get to her or get to somebody with a conscience that feels like 27 years might be long enough to keep a secret.
Brad, God bless you. God bless Amy. God bless your family. We're truly grateful for your time today.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.